Good morning. Welcome to Prepper Nation. I am John. Thank you very much for being here and for subscribing to the channel. It's truly appreciated. Let's go ahead and jump into it. Let's talk about nukes this morning. And when I say let's talk about nukes, I'm not talking about nukes raining down, boom, boom, we're all going to die. None of the not fear porn this morning, so much as it is breaking down the government's plan for the civilian population during a time pre-nuke, during these strikes, and post-nuke. Okay, this is now available in a declassified document. And folks, if you're in the Coffee Club or Patreon, you should have gotten access to the document yesterday. It is 50 plus pages, I think. So there are different phases in this document, and we're going to break down the main ones and what to expect as a prepper and a civilian here in the United States. Okay, starts with the pre-attack phase, and I'm reading here, so y'all bear with me. Reading's hard. Consumer rationing on a massive scale is mentioned specifically in this declassified document. Also, and we're going to break down and I'll explain what this stuff means in just a second. Maintain control of food supplies in order to maintain control of the population. As many people have said in the prepping community in the past, you control the food, you control the population. The government is taking it one step further during a time of crisis like this, and also throwing in supplies, some medicines that are needed and things like this, and plus food and water, of course. And so this is problematic for a couple of reasons in breaking this down. Consumer rationing on a massive scale. This immediately busts up the fallacy that the government keeps spitting out. You keep hearing the government, and you'll hear the USDA, and you'll hear these three-letter agencies even sometimes tell you during times of crisis, and we heard it over and over during the pandemic, stop buying so much stuff. There's plenty to go around. There's no reason for you to go out and buy 12 cans of green beans, son. You just need to buy one or two. All right. There's plenty to go around. Stop hoarding, stop panic shopping, the whole nine yards. And what this is actually telling you is it's the contrary. Consumer rationing on a massive scale. If there was plenty to go around, why would they initiate rationing in phase one? And this is prior to the nukes, by the way. This is the United States government gets credible intel that nukes are going to hit American soil. They immediately begin rationing against the American consumer because they know inherently there's not enough to go around. All right. And most preppers out there should know this as well. This is why we stack stuff, right? And grow stuff. Where you at, Milton? Maintain control of food supplies in the population. So not only are they going to stop you from the ability, they're going to put an end to the ability of going in the grocery store and buying whatever you can afford, okay? Rationing 101. But they're going to control the supply chain via the federal government moving forward during phase one, again, before the nukes hit. You would have military trucks. You would have the potential of FEMA or even the UN, sorry, folks, coming in, taking the supplies that are available to the public, kind of putting them off into a corner, and they would begin to dictate who gets what. This is how they would maintain control, because otherwise you would have lawlessness, is what they're saying. So the second phase is the nuke exchange phase. This is when it goes red hot and nukes begin to fall. This is the government's plan, again, according to declassified documents. Number one, issue a freeze and release order. We'll get into all these in a minute as well. Number two, anti-hoarding mandates. So this one's problematic because hoarding can mean different things to different people. Who dictates what hoarding actually means? Many of us stacked strategically, and I don't consider that hoarding, but the government, they'll come in, they'll say if you have more than 2 days worth of food, they would classify you 2 or 3 days worth of food. You're a hoarder. Then they're gonna take everything else that you have at that point and leave you with just a couple of days. That's problematic, right? Requisition orders, which we will get into, conservation and limitation orders, and they would also determine rationing. How much of this is how much soap, how much wheat, how much whatever, water, and they would also determine who receives what. Um, so again, this honestly is problematic because it puts a lot of power into the hands of state and local governments. You know, who's getting what? Joe Schmo over here may be getting nothing, whereas your illegal immigrant may be getting a lot more. And I'm not picking on immigrants per se, but again, the power is going to shift temporarily from the federal government to state and local governments. So, if you're in Montana, things are going to look a lot different than if you're in New York City. There will be preferential treatment depending on who you are and where you come from and things of this nature. So, to break down the nuke exchange phase in common terms here, there would be property seizure. Okay. So this goes into a conversation that we had just a few days ago, people buying online and stuff like this. Government knows what you have. They need generators. They know you got generators. They're taking your generator. Sorry. If they know you have a bunch of survival food and it's beneficial that they take your survival food for the National Guard, for the UN, they're taking your survival food at this point. Property seizure. Again, they're going to go through the home very quickly, from what I understand, 10 minutes and under. And they're going to ask you some questions. Do you have this? Do you have this? They may have a list of the things that they believe that you have. They're going to scan with their eyes. They're going to look in obvious places. Um, so I think that it would be a skill as a prepper to be able to quickly hide certain valuables during this time. Property seizure, martial law would be in effect most definitely. And martial law, again, is going to after the property seizures, they're gonna slap you with curfews, they're going to limit where you can go. We began to see a lot of this during the pandemic, quite frankly. I remember New York City and checkpoints and things being set up and having to have certain paperwork to move back and forth. So you would have to understand the government is going to implement this times 10, if not times 100, during a time of nuke strikes. Financial freezing. So the freeze and release orders, this is talking about your money. If you have money or assets in the bank whatsoever, they're going to put a freeze on everything. You're not going to be allowed to spend money that you have in a bank during a time like this. If you have cash on hand, if you have gold and silver on hand to barter with or other barter items, that's great. But if all of your money is tied up into a bank because it's FDIC insured, right? You're not going to have access to this money. That's exactly what that means. And redistribution, getting back to determine the rations and who receives what, redistribution. So they're going to seize your stuff if you have an abundance or if you're considered a hoarder. Again, you got more than 2 days worth of food. They're going to seize what they deem necessary. And this, again, is going to vary wildly. If you're in Wyoming, you've got a decent sheriff. The sheriff may say you can keep a week's worth of food. If you're in New York City, you only need 48 hours worth, so to speak. And they're going to seize everything else. Then they're going to redistribute what you have. They may redistribute it to state and local authorities. All right. It may go on a truck somewhere to go to a FEMA camp. This may go to the UN. This may go to people that didn't prep, right? Getting back to your normies and your zombies and your illegals. Well, they've got to be fed too. So the state and local government is going to look at your stuff and they're going to redistribute it communism style at that point. And the third phase is the post hostilities phase. So this is assuming you didn't starve to death, you didn't freeze to death, you didn't get rationed to the grave, and you survived nukes dropping. All right, so the government at this time is going to they have a plan to restore federal authority, meaning, during this whole chaotic process, again, state and local governments have been in charge. The federal government is going to come back in and at that point assume control from the states and local governments. And they're going to begin to dictate top down what needs to happen at that point. They're going to be in recovery mode. Um, and they have a plan for information control, meaning you're only going to see what they want you to see here in the United States of America. And there's a high probability that if the grid is up, it may not be, but if the grid is up, the internet could potentially be blacked out on purpose by the government. So we are not able to exchange information back and forth. People in California are not able to let people in Florida know what's going on in California and vice versa. The only news you're going to get is news from the federal government, alerts and things like this, in whatever form they come in. Okay. So, as a prepper, how do we approach this memo and how do we approach a country if it were hit by nukes in certain areas? Okay, and I would have to think even tactical nukes, which are not going to be widespread and take out the entire country. If we begin to see tactical nukes, you're probably going to see this almost nationwide. First, you better learn to be grayer than a Crayola crayon. You know the gray crayon, son? You need to be grayer than that, meaning you cannot stand out. During a time like this, when people are hurting, people are facing starvation, potentially, they're facing freezing to death. You cannot stand out as a prepper. During this time, there ain't gonna be no Prepper Nation videos dropping, is what I'm gonna try and tell you. They ain't I'm gonna look like a hobo on the street. They ain't gonna be able to find me, son. Stand in food lines. Even if you've stacked it to the rafters 100 times over, even if you've got a massive garden that's hidden from plain sight and nobody knows about, even if you have an abundance of food, it seems like a jerk thing to do, right? To go stand in a food line and collect a box of food that you don't actually really need when you get right down to it. It seems like you're taking from other people. But the issue and the counter argument is if you're not standing in a food line for several days, people are going to pick up on this and they're going to realize, okay, this person hasn't been here to collect food. What are they doing? Have they starved to death? No. They have a stockpile of food, and we need to go find out how much they have. So this can actually bring your neighbors on you. This can bring the authorities on you to confiscate what you've hidden well, right? You need to appear to suffer like everybody else around you. And you're probably going to be suffering during a time of nukes here in the United States of America. But to be blunt, okay, a lot of preppers during an SHTF, they have it better than most. All right, a lot of preppers during a grid down, say you have a blizzard and you have a grid down, okay? A lot of preppers still have electricity, right? We're not freezing. We're not starving. We're not worried about and praying, please snowplow, come plow the road so I can get to Food City. We're not worried about that. But during a time like this, you must appear like you are worried about that. You have to stand in the food lines. You have to tell people, I don't know what we're going to do. We're out of food here. You're going to have to play the game a little bit and hustle people a little bit, unfortunately. Maybe appear dirty and unshaven. Not a problem for some of us beaverains, right? Appear dirty and unshaven and just like you're up against it 24/7. I've had 2 hours of sleep. We don't know what we're going to do. We're over here eating broth. This is all we've got. And then once you get inside and everything's closed off to the rest of the world, then you can prosper as a prepper. Um, Pray that you skipped out on Cyber Monday, like we were talking about the other morning, because if you've ordered an abundance of prepping gear that's going to red flag you as a prepper on Cyber Monday, they're going to come knocking at some point. Okay. Make sure that your family stays tight lipped. All right. Especially if you have kids. Kids can slip up and say the least little thing, and it's gonna set the werewolves and the zombies to your front door. So you got to make sure your family knows how to act and what to say and what not to say and stuff like this. Begin to self ration everything. When you see rationing and you see food lines, at this point, even if you're sitting on a stockpile, you need to begin to self ration at home because you don't know how long it's going to be. I would think in this situation, it's going to be a very long time, right? So self ration, skip a meal here and there. And many of you have already conditioned yourself to do that. And finally, just ride out the storm as best you can. There will be rough spots even as a prepper, but you'll get through those rough spots. If you've survived the blasts somehow and you've made it to the point where you see ration lines and stuff, you've got a long way to go. As the nation rebuilds and the Fed tries to reassume control, and it's going to be a lot of bad things happening. But as a prepper, you should be okay. Be ready to ride out the storm at that point. So I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments if you don't mind. Both live chat and replay crowd. I look for those. Y'all take care. God bless.